The rain hammered down on Isaac Crawford's worn porch like bullets, turning the Colorado dust into rivers of mud that snaked between the fence posts of his ranch outside Greeley. And through that curtain of water, he saw something that made him set down his whiskey glass and stand up so fast his chair scraped across the wood. A woman was stumbling up his path, soaked through to the bone, her dress clinging to her frame as she swayed with exhaustion. Isaac grabbed his coat and ran out into the downpour without thinking, his boots splashing through puddles as he reached her just as her knees buckled. "I have got you," he said, catching her before she hit the ground. She was light in his arms, trembling like a newborn calf, her dark hair plastered to her pale face. Her eyes fluttered open for just a moment, revealing the most striking green he had ever seen, before they closed again. Isaac carried her inside his ranch house, kicking the door shut behind him against the storm. The fire in the hearth was burning low, so he laid her gently on the sofa and quickly built it back up until flames danced high and warm. Then he grabbed every blanket he owned and wrapped them around her shivering form. Her lips were turning blue, and Isaac knew he needed to get her out of those wet clothes before she caught her death. He averted his eyes as much as possible while helping her out of the soaked dress, replacing it with one of his old shirts that hung on her like a tent. Her breathing was shallow and quick, and worry gnawed at his gut. "Come on now, do not do this to me," he muttered, rubbing her cold hands between his calloused palms. "I have not had company in 3 years, and I will be damned if you die on my sofa the first night." It was a poor attempt at humor, talking to an unconscious woman, but the sound of his own voice in the usually silent house felt strange. Good strange, maybe, but Isaac pushed that thought away and focused on getting her warm. He heated water on the stove and made a weak broth, managing to get a few spoonfuls past her lips. Her color started to improve as the hours passed, the deathly pallor giving way to a soft flush across her cheeks. Isaac sat in his chair beside the sofa, watching her breathe, and realized he had not felt this kind of purpose in longer than he cared to remember. The storm raged on through the night. Isaac dozed fitfully, jerking awake every time she made a sound. By morning, the rain had lessened to a drizzle, and pale sunlight was trying to break through the clouds, and that was when she opened her eyes. "Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "My ranch about 5 miles outside Greeley," Isaac said, leaning forward. "You collapsed on my property last night in the storm. I am Isaac Crawford." She looked around the sparse room, her eyes taking in the rough furniture, the stone fireplace, the guns mounted on the wall. "Violet Evans," she said finally. "Thank you for helping me. What were you doing out there?" "There is nothing for miles except my ranch and the old Henderson place, and nobody has lived there for years." Violet tried to sit up, wincing. "I was traveling from Kansas. My wagon broke an axle about 10 miles back. I tried to unhitch one of the horses, but they both spooked at thunder and ran off. I have been walking for hours, maybe longer. I lost track of time. Traveling alone." Isaac stood and poured her a cup of water from the pitcher. "My father died 3 months ago, cholera. My mother passed when I was 12. Violet took the cup with shaking hands and drank deeply. "Father left me a little money and a letter from his brother, my uncle, who has a homestead near Fort Collins. I was going to start fresh there, help him with his land." Isaac felt a pang of sympathy. He knew about loss, about trying to outrun grief by changing locations. It never worked, but people kept trying anyway. "I will ride out later and see if I can find your wagon, salvage what I can. You are in no condition to travel right now anyway." "I cannot impose on you," Violet said, but even as she spoke, she swayed where she sat. "You are not imposing. You are recovering." Isaac moved to the kitchen area and started pulling out supplies. When did you last eat a real meal? Violet was quiet for a long moment. 2 days ago, I think. I rationed what I had, not knowing how long I would need to make it last. Isaac shook his head and set about making breakfast. It had been a long time since he had cooked for anyone but himself, and he found himself putting more care into it than usual. Eggs from his chickens, bacon from his smokehouse, biscuits from the dough he kept in the cool box. Simple food but filling, they ate in silence, but it was not uncomfortable. Violet had the kind of quietness about her that felt peaceful rather than awkward. She did not fill the air with needless chatter, and Isaac appreciated that. He had gotten used to silence over the past 3 years, but somehow her presence did not disturb it the way he thought another person would. "This is very good," Violet said, wiping her mouth with the napkin he had provided. "I did not realize how hungry I was." "You need rest more than anything else," Isaac said. "That sofa is yours for as long as you need it. I should write to my uncle, let him know I am delayed. I will ride into Greeley tomorrow, post a letter for you." Isaac stood and started clearing the dishes. "For now, you should sleep." Violet looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion won out. She settled back onto the sofa, and within minutes, her breathing had evened out into sleep. Isaac covered her with a blanket and then headed outside to tend to his animals. The rain had stopped completely, leaving everything smelling fresh and clean. Water dripped from the barn roof as Isaac fed his horses and checked on his small herd of cattle. The work was familiar, soothing in its routine. But today, his mind kept wandering back to the house, to the woman sleeping on his sofa. He had not been lying when he said it had been 3 years since he'd had company. After his wife Sarah died giving birth to their stillborn son, Isaac had retreated into himself and his work. The ranch became his entire world, a barrier between him and the pain of what he had lost. Friends from town had tried to reach out at first, but Isaac had rebuffed them all until they stopped coming. The loneliness had become so familiar that he barely noticed it anymore. Or at least, that was what he had told himself. Now, with Violet's presence in his house, he realized just how hollow his life had become. The sound of another person breathing, the simple act of sharing a meal, it awakened something in him that he had thought long dead. Isaac spent the afternoon repairing a section of fence that had come loose in the storm. The physical labor felt good, helped him sort through his tangled thoughts. When he returned to the house as the sun was setting, Violet was awake and sitting up, looking much better than she had that morning. "You have some color back," Isaac observed, hanging his hat on the peg by the door. "I feel almost human again," Violet said with a small smile. "I hope you do not mind, but I explored your kitchen a bit. I wanted to make dinner to thank you, but I was not sure what you might have planned." "I never plan anything," Isaac admitted. "I just eat whatever I pull together. If you are feeling up to cooking, I certainly would not complain." Violet stood, still wrapped in his shirt that fell to her knees, and moved to the kitchen area. "I am not an amazing cook, but my father always said I made a decent stew. You have vegetables. Root cellar is through that door," Isaac pointed. "Help yourself to whatever you find." He watched as she descended into the cellar and emerged with potatoes, carrots, and onions. There was something almost domestic about the scene, something that made his chest ache with old longing. But he pushed those feelings down and went to wash up from the day's work. By the time he returned, Violet had a pot going on the stove, and the smell of cooking meat and vegetables filled the house. It smelled like a home, not just a place where a man slept between long days of work. "I found your extra dresses in the bedroom," Isaac said, trying not to sound awkward. "I mean, I found some women's dresses. I hung them near the fire earlier so they would dry." Violet turned from the stove, her expression soft. Those were your wife's, Isaac nodded, not trusting his voice for a moment. Sarah, she died 3 years ago. I am sorry. Violet's words were simple but sincere. You do not have to talk about it if you do not want to. I do not talk about it, Isaac said. I have not talked about much of anything for 3 years. Grief is like that sometimes, Violet said, stirring the pot. After my mother died, my father barely spoke for 6 months. Then one day he just started talking again, like a dam had broken. Everyone handles loss differently. They ate dinner together as darkness fell outside. Violet had been modest about her cooking skills. The stew was excellent, rich and flavorful. Isaac could not remember the last time he had eaten something that tasted like someone had cared about making it. Tell me about your ranch, Violet said as they ate. How long have you had it? Bought the land 7 years ago in 1873, Isaac said. Built the house myself, started with just a few head of cattle, grew it slowly. It is not much, but it is mine. It is beautiful land, Violet said. Even in the rain, I could tell, Colorado is different from Kansas, bigger somehow. You planning to stay with your uncle permanently? Isaac asked, then wondered why he cared about the answer. Violet was quiet for a moment. I do not know. The letter he sent my father was welcoming, but we have never met. He and my father had some kind of falling out years ago before I was born. They only recently reconciled through letters. I suppose I am hoping for family, for a place to belong. Isaac understood that longing. He had felt unmoored since Sarah died, like a boat that had slipped its anchor and was drifting in dark waters, but he did not say any of that. Instead, he just nodded and finished his stew. Over the next few days, a routine developed between them. Violet's strength returned quickly, and she insisted on helping around the house. She cooked meals, mended clothes she found in a basket that had been sitting neglected for months, and even helped Isaac with some of the lighter ranch work. He found her in the chicken coop one morning, talking softly to the hens as she collected eggs. They like you better than they like me, Isaac said from the doorway. That brown one usually pecks at my hand. Violet smiled, and Isaac realized it was the first real smile he had seen from her. It transformed her face, made her eyes light up. My mother kept chickens. I always loved gathering eggs, feeling them still warm in my hand. Isaac rode out to find Violet's wagon on the third day. It took hours of searching, but he finally located it in a ravine, tipped on its side. The contents were scattered and mostly ruined by rain, but he managed to salvage a trunk of clothes, some books, and a small wooden box that contained what looked like family photographs and letters. When he brought everything back to the ranch, Violet's eyes filled with tears. I thought it was all lost, she said, carefully lifting out a photograph of a stern-looking man and a young woman. My parents on their wedding day. I am glad I could find it, Isaac said, and he meant it. The look of relief and gratitude on her face made the long, frustrating search worth every minute. That evening, Violet showed him the photographs and told him stories about her life. Her mother had been a schoolteacher, her father a clerk in a general store. They had been happy, if not wealthy, and Violet's childhood had been filled with books and learning. She had hoped to become a teacher herself, but then her mother got sick, and those dreams had faded into the background of survival. What did you do before the ranch? Violet asked. Isaac found himself talking more than he had in years. He told her about growing up in Missouri, about coming west to find adventure and opportunity. He had worked as a cowhand for several years, learning the business before deciding to strike out on his own. And then he had met Sarah in Greeley, a quiet girl who worked in her father's restaurant. She was the one who convinced me to buy this land, Isaac said, staring into his coffee cup. Said she could see our whole future here. A house full of children, a growing herd, a real legacy. She sounds like she was special, Violet said gently. She was. Isaac's voice was rough. When she died, I felt like that future died with her. I stopped being able to see past the next day's work. Violet reached across the table and placed her hand over his. It was a simple gesture, but it sent warmth spreading through Isaac's chest. He looked up and met her eyes, seeing understanding and something else there, something that made his breath catch. Maybe that future changed, Violet said softly, but that does not mean there cannot be a different one. The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Then Violet pulled her hand back, color rising in her cheeks, and Isaac cleared his throat and stood to refill his coffee, even though his cup was still half full. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Isaac kept meaning to take Violet into town so she could continue her journey north to her uncle, but somehow he never quite got around to suggesting it. And Violet, for her part, did not bring it up either. She seemed content to help around the ranch, and Isaac found himself relying on her presence more than he wanted to admit. She had a way of making the house feel alive. She sang while she cooked, hummed while she worked. She put wildflowers in jars on the table and opened windows to let in fresh air. She asked Isaac questions about the ranch, about his plans, and actually listened to his answers. And slowly, without quite realizing when it happened, Isaac found himself talking to her not just about practical matters, but about thoughts and feelings he had kept locked away. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Violet said, "I should write to my uncle again. Let him know when I will be arriving." Isaac felt his stomach drop. "Right, of course. I can take you to Greeley tomorrow, see about getting you a stage ticket north." "Is that what you want?" Violet turned to look at him, her green eyes searching his face. "What I want?" Isaac's heart was pounding. "What I want does not really matter. You have family waiting for you." "I have an uncle I have never met waiting for me," Violet corrected. "That is not the same thing as family, not really. These past weeks here, helping you with the ranch, it has felt more like home than anywhere else I have been since my parents died." Isaac wanted to tell her to stay. The words were right there, pressing against his throat. But fear held them back. Fear that he was reading too much into her kindness, that she was just being grateful for him taking her in. Fear that if he let himself care for someone again, he would just end up broken when he lost them. "You deserve more than this," Isaac said finally. "More than a broken-down rancher living alone in the middle of nowhere. What if I do not want more?" Violet's voice was passionate now. "What if I want exactly this? What if I want a place where I can work hard and see the results of that work? What if I want someone who understands loss and is not afraid of silence, but also knows how to appreciate the small moments of joy?" "Violet," Isaac started, but she cut him off. "I am not fragile, Isaac. I am not some delicate thing that will break. I have survived more than you know. And I am not looking for someone to rescue me or take care of me. I can take care of myself." She stood, her hands clenched at her sides. "But I have also learned that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let ourselves be happy again. Let ourselves risk caring about someone, even knowing we could lose them." Isaac stood too, his hands shaking. "I do not know if I can do that. After Sarah, I swore I would never put myself through that kind of pain again." "So you chose a different kind of pain," Violet said. "Loneliness. Isolation. A half-life instead of a whole one." Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I understand that, I truly do. But Isaac, we cannot honor the people we have lost by refusing to live." Something in Isaac's chest cracked open like ice breaking up in spring. All the feelings he had been trying to ignore, trying to push down, came flooding through. "I do not want you to go," he said, his voice breaking. I want you to stay. I want to come home every evening and find you here. I want to hear you singing in the kitchen. I want to sit with you on this porch and watch the sun go down. I want all of that, and it terrifies me." Violet closed the distance between them, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "I am terrified too," she whispered, "but I think we could be brave together." Isaac pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. She fit there perfectly, her head tucked under his chin. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other as the sky darkened and stars began to appear. "Stay," Isaac said into her hair. "Please stay." "Yes," Violet answered. "Yes, I will stay." They pulled apart slightly, and Isaac looked down into her face. He had not kissed anyone since Sarah had not even thought about it. But now, looking at Violet's upturned face, her lips slightly parted, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but she rose up to meet him. The kiss was soft and tentative at first, both of them finding their way. Then it deepened, became more sure, and Isaac felt something in his heart that he had thought was dead forever. Hope. The possibility of happiness. A future that was not just endless days of work and loneliness. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Violet smiled up at him. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," she admitted. "Why did you not say anything?" Isaac asked, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "Because you needed time, and so did I, if I am being honest." Violet leaned into his touch. "This is not just gratitude, Isaac. This is not me clinging to the first person who showed me kindness. I have feelings for you, real feelings, and they have been growing stronger every day." "I have feelings for you too," Isaac said, and it felt good to finally say it out loud. "I think I started falling for you that first night when you looked at me with those green eyes, even though you were more dead than alive." Violet laughed. "That is a terrible moment to start falling for someone." "Well, I never claimed to have good timing." Isaac grinned, feeling lighter than he had in years. "But Violet, I need you to understand something. This ranch, it is a hard life. Long hours, unpredictable income, isolation. If you stay, you need to know what you are signing up for." "I grew up poor, Isaac. I know about hard work and making do with little. That does not scare me." Violet's expression turned serious. "What scares me is wasting the life I have been given by playing it safe. My mother used to say that we do not get unlimited chances at happiness. When it appears, we need to be brave enough to reach for it." Isaac kissed her again, longer this time, pouring all his hope and fear and longing into it. When they came up for air, he rested his forehead against hers. "We will write to your uncle tomorrow. Explain that you have decided to stay here and that you are safe and happy." "He might not understand," Violet said. "Then we will deal with that if it happens. But you are a grown woman, Violet. You get to choose your own path." They went inside as the night grew cold, and Isaac built up the fire while Violet made tea. It felt comfortable and domestic, a preview of all the evenings to come. They sat close together on the sofa, talking late into the night about everything and nothing. Plans for the ranch, memories of the past, hopes for the future. "I want to expand the herd," Isaac said. "Maybe get some sheep too, diversify a bit. And I have been thinking about planting an orchard, though that is a long-term investment." "I could start a garden," Violet said. "A real one, big enough to preserve food for winter and maybe sell some in town. And I saw you have space for a dairy cow. Fresh milk and butter could bring in extra income." Isaac loved how naturally she said, "I," like she was already part of the ranch's future. "You have been thinking about this." "I cannot help it," Violet admitted. "Every time I look around, I see potential. This place could really thrive with a little more investment and care." "It already is thriving," Isaac said. "You brought life back to it. You brought life back to me." Violet kissed him, soft and sweet. We brought life back to each other. The next morning, Isaac woke up earlier than usual despite the late night. Violet was still asleep on the sofa, curled up under blankets, her dark hair spread across the pillow. Isaac stood watching her for a moment, still hardly able to believe this was real, that she had chosen to stay with him. He made coffee quietly and headed out to start the day's work. The sky was just beginning to lighten, and the air was crisp and clean. As he fed the horses, Isaac found himself planning. If Violet was really going to stay, she would need her own space. He could not ask her to keep sleeping on the sofa. Maybe he could add on to the house, build a proper bedroom. Or maybe, if things continued the way they seemed to be going, she would not need her own room at all. That thought made Isaac's face heat up, but it also made him smile. He had not thought about a future with someone in so long that it felt strange and wonderful all at once. When he came back inside for breakfast, Violet was up and dressed in one of Sarah's old dresses that she had altered to fit. She had tied her hair back with a ribbon, and she looked fresh and beautiful in the morning light. "Good morning," she said, smiling at him in a way that made his heart skip. "Morning." Isaac hung up his hat. "I was thinking if you are serious about staying, we should ride into Greeley today. Post that letter to your uncle and maybe see about getting you some proper supplies. Clothes, personal items, whatever you need." "I do not need much," Violet said. "But I would like to see the town. I only passed through in the stage, and I was too worried about getting to my uncle's place to really notice anything." They rode into Greeley together after breakfast, Violet sitting behind Isaac on his horse, since hers had never been found. She wrapped her arms around his waist, and Isaac was acutely aware of her pressed against his back, her breath warm on his neck. Greeley was growing rapidly. New buildings going up all the time. It had been founded less than a decade ago as an agricultural colony, and it was thriving under its system of irrigation and cooperative ideals. Isaac did not come to town often, preferring the solitude of his ranch, but Violet looked around with interest as they rode down the main street. "It is bigger than I expected," she said. "The railroad came through a few years back, changed everything." Isaac helped her down from the horse and tied it to a hitching post outside the general store, made it easier to get supplies in and cattle out. They went into the store together, and Isaac tried not to notice the curious looks from other customers. He had been such a hermit for the past 3 years that people were probably shocked to see him with a woman. Let them look, he thought. Let them gossip. He did not care. Violet picked out some basic necessities, practical items rather than frivolous ones. Isaac paid for everything over her protests, telling her that if she was going to be working on his ranch, he could at least provide proper supplies. While the shopkeeper wrapped everything up, Isaac noticed a display of hair ribbons near the counter. He picked out a green one that matched Violet's eyes and added it to the pile. "You did not have to do that," Violet said softly as they left the store, but she was smiling. "I wanted to." Isaac carried the packages to the horse. "Now let us get that letter posted." At the post office, Violet wrote a brief note to her uncle explaining that she had met someone and decided to settle near Greeley instead of continuing to Fort Collins. She kept it simple, not going into detail, and Isaac could not help but wonder if she was protecting herself from potential criticism or judgment. "Do you think he will be angry?" Isaac asked as they left the post office. "I do not know him well enough to say," Violet admitted. "But even if he is, I have made my choice. I am choosing my own happiness for once." They had lunch at a small restaurant, and Isaac noticed Violet watching the other women in town with interest. Most of them wore more fashionable clothes than her simple altered dress, and he wondered if she felt out of place. "We could have a proper dress made for you," Isaac said. "I saw a seamstress shop down the street." I do not need anything fancy, Violet said. This is fine for ranch work. But maybe for town visits or church on Sundays. Violet looked at him with surprise. Do you go to church? Isaac shifted uncomfortably. I stopped after Sarah died, but maybe it is time I started again. If you wanted to go, I mean. I would like that, Violet said. My mother used to take me every Sunday. I have missed it. Before they left town, they stopped at the seamstress shop. The woman there, a Mrs. Peterson, looked at Violet with shrewd but kind eyes and took her measurements efficiently. I can have a day dress and a Sunday dress ready in 2 weeks, she said. Good quality fabric, proper construction. They will last you years. Isaac paid a deposit, and they left with an appointment to return for a fitting. As they rode back to the ranch in the late afternoon, Violet's arms around him felt like the most natural thing in the world. The weeks that followed fell into a comfortable pattern. Isaac and Violet worked side by side during the day, building up the ranch. They cleared land for Violet's garden, repaired fences, tended to the animals. In the evenings, they cooked dinner together and sat on the porch talking until the stars came out, and slowly, carefully, their physical relationship deepened. Kisses became longer, more passionate. Isaac's hands learned the curve of Violet's waist, the softness of her hair. Violet's fingers traced the lines of his face, memorizing every detail. They were both cautious, both aware of how precious this growing love was, how easily it could be damaged if they moved too fast. One evening, about 6 weeks after Violet had first stumbled onto Isaac's ranch, she looked at him across the dinner table with a serious expression. I want you to tell me about Sarah, she said. Really tell me, not just the brief mentions you have made. Isaac felt his throat tighten. Why? Because she was important to you. Because she is part of your past, part of what made you who you are. Violet reached across to take his hand. And because I do not want her to be this ghost we never talk about, I want to understand who she was. So Isaac talked. He told Violet about meeting Sarah in town, about her shy smile and gentle nature. He talked about their courtship, how he had been so nervous asking her father for permission to marry her that he had stumbled over his words like a fool. He described their wedding day, small but perfect, and the joy of building the ranch together. And then, his voice breaking, he told her about Sarah's pregnancy. How happy they had both been, making plans for their child. How everything had gone wrong during the birth. How he had held his wife as she slipped away, unable to do anything to save her or their son. I felt so powerless, Isaac said, tears streaming down his face. I could not protect them. I could not save them, and I swore I would never let myself feel that helpless again. Violet came around the table and pulled him into her arms. She did not try to tell him it was not his fault or that everything happened for a reason. She just held him while he cried, letting him release 3 years of grief that he had bottled up inside. When Isaac finally pulled himself together, he felt emptied out but also lighter somehow. I am sorry, he said roughly. That was not fair to you. Do not apologize for grieving, Violet said firmly. And thank you for trusting me with that story. I know it was not easy to tell. I want you to know something, Isaac said, taking both of her hands in his. What I feel for you, it is not about replacing Sarah or trying to recreate what we had. You are your own person, Violet. You have your own place in my heart, and I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and your laugh. I love the way you talk to the chickens and how you hum when you are concentrating. I love the future I can see when I look at you. Violet's eyes filled with tears. I love you too, Isaac. I think I have loved you since you wrapped me in blankets and refused to let me die on your sofa. They kissed, and it felt like a promise of healing and new beginnings and a future built together. Marry me, Isaac said suddenly, surprising himself as much as Violet. I know it is fast, and if you want to wait, I understand. But Violet, I am sure about this, about you, about us. Yes, Violet said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, I will marry you. Isaac stood and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around the small kitchen while she laughed. When he set her down, they were both breathless and grinning like fools. When? Violet asked. When should we do it? As soon as possible, Isaac said. Unless you want a big wedding with lots of people. I want you and me and a preacher, Violet said. That is all I need. They rode back into Greeley the next day to speak with the minister. Reverend Thompson was a young man who had only been in town for a year, so he did not have much history with Isaac. He listened to their story with interest and agreed to perform the ceremony the following Sunday. I am glad to see you happy, Mr. Crawford, the Reverend said as they were leaving. The Lord does not want us to carry our grief forever. He gives us new seasons of joy. That Sunday, they went to church together for the first time. Isaac had not been inside the building since Sarah's funeral, and his hands shook as they walked through the door. But Violet squeezed his hand, and he took a deep breath and kept walking. A few people stared, but most welcomed him back warmly. Mrs. Chen, who ran the boarding house, was particularly effusive in her greetings. It is so wonderful to see you again, Mr. Crawford. And who is this lovely young lady? This is Violet Evans, Isaac said, pride clear in his voice. My fiancée. We are getting married next Sunday. That caused quite a stir, and by the time the service started, Isaac was sure everyone in the building was whispering about them. But he did not care. He sat with Violet's hand in his, and listened to Reverend Thompson preach about renewal and second chances, and he felt truly at peace for the first time in 3 years. The week before their wedding was a flurry of preparations. Violet finished altering one of Sarah's nicer dresses to wear for the ceremony. Isaac cleaned the house from top to bottom and bought supplies for a small celebration afterward. They invited only a handful of people: Reverend Thompson, Mrs. Chen, who had been kind to them at church, and Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, who ran the general store and seamstress shop. The night before the wedding, Isaac and Violet sat on the porch watching the sun set. Are you nervous? Violet asked. No, Isaac said, and he meant it. This feels right. You feel right. I keep thinking about how different my life would be if I had not gotten caught in that storm, Violet said. If my wagon had not broken down right where it did, I would be living with a stranger, my uncle, trying to fit into a life that was not really mine. Instead, I am here with you, about to marry the man I love. It feels like fate. I do not know about fate, Isaac said, but I do know I am grateful. You saved me, Violet. I did not even realize I needed saving, but you brought light back into my life. We saved each other, Violet corrected, kissing him softly. That is what love does. They married the next day in the small church, with sunlight streaming through the windows and their few guests smiling from the pews. Violet wore the altered blue dress and a crown of wildflowers in her hair. Isaac wore his best suit, brushed clean and pressed carefully. When Reverend Thompson asked if he took Violet to be his wife, Isaac's voice was strong and sure. I do. And when Violet said the same words back to him, Isaac felt his heart swell with so much love he thought it might burst. They celebrated afterward with cake that Mrs. Chen had made and punch from the restaurant. It was simple and perfect, exactly what they both wanted. As the afternoon wore on and their guests left one by one, Isaac and Violet rode back to the ranch as husband and wife. That night, in the room that had once been Sarah's but was now truly theirs, Isaac and Violet came together as husband and wife. It was tender and passionate, a little awkward at first, but then increasingly natural as they learned each other's bodies. Afterward, lying tangled together in the sheets, Isaac felt a completeness he had never expected to feel again. "I love you," he whispered into Violet's hair. "I love you too," she whispered back. "My husband." The word sent a thrill through Isaac. Husband. He was a husband again, but this time felt different. Not better or worse than what he had with Sarah, just different. Its own unique thing built on its own foundation. As fall turned to winter, Isaac and Violet settled into married life. They worked together to prepare the ranch for the cold months ahead, stockpiling firewood and preserving food. Violet's garden had produced abundantly in its first season, and they had enough vegetables put up to last through winter with some left over to sell in town. Snow came early that year, blanketing the ranch in white. On days when the work was caught up, Isaac and Violet would stay inside by the fire, reading or talking or simply being together in comfortable silence. Violet had a talent for needlework, and she made curtains for the windows and a quilt for their bed. Isaac carved her a set of wooden spoons and a cutting board for the kitchen. They got a letter from Violet's uncle in December. He was disappointed that she had not come to Fort Collins as planned, but he wished her well and hoped she would visit when the weather improved. The letter was cordial if not warm, and Violet seemed relieved that he had not been angry. "Maybe in the spring we can take a trip up there," Isaac suggested. "Let him meet me, see that you made a good choice." "You are the best choice I ever made," Violet said, kissing him. "And yes, a visit would be nice. I would like to meet him, even if we are not close." Christmas came, and they celebrated quietly together. Isaac gave Violet a locket he had bought in town, with a space inside for a photograph. Violet gave him a new hat that she had saved up to buy, better quality than the worn one he usually wore. "I do not deserve you," Isaac said, holding her close. "You deserve all the happiness in the world," Violet said. "And so do I. That is why we fit so perfectly together." As winter slowly gave way to spring, Violet started feeling ill in the mornings. At first, she thought it was something she ate, but when it continued for more than a week, Isaac insisted they go see the doctor in town. Dr. Harrison was an older man who had been practicing medicine in Colorado for 20 years. He examined Violet thoroughly and then gave them news that made Isaac's heart stop. "Congratulations, Mrs. Crawford. You are expecting a baby." Isaac felt the room spin. All the old fear came rushing back, memories of Sarah's pregnancy and how it had ended in tragedy. But then Violet grabbed his hand and squeezed tight, and he looked into her eyes and saw joy there, not fear. "Are you all right?" she asked him softly. "I will be," Isaac said, and he meant it. This was not the same situation. Violet was not Sarah. And he was not the same man he had been 3 years ago. He was stronger now, more capable of handling whatever came. "The pregnancy appears to be progressing normally," Dr. Harrison said. "Mrs. Crawford is young and healthy. I see no reason to expect complications, but of course, we will monitor everything carefully." On the ride home, Isaac was quiet, his thoughts churning. Violet did not push him to talk, just rested her head against his back and let him process. When they got back to the ranch, Isaac helped Violet down from the horse and then held her face in his hands. "I am scared," he admitted. "After what happened with Sarah, the thought of going through that again terrifies me. But Violet, I am also happy. The thought of having a child with you, of building a family together, it is everything I thought I had lost." "I am scared too," Violet said. "Any woman would be, knowing the risks. But Isaac, we cannot let fear steal our joy. We are going to trust in God and each other, and we are going to believe that everything will be all right." "I am going to take such good care of you," Isaac said fiercely. "You will not lift anything heavy. You will rest whenever you need to. I am going to make sure you and this baby are safe." "I am not made of glass," Violet said with a smile, "but I will let you pamper me a little." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through spring and into summer. Violet's belly grew round, and Isaac found himself constantly reaching out to place his hand there, feeling the baby move. It amazed him every time, this life they had created together. He built a cradle from oak wood, spending hours sanding it smooth and carving designs into the sides. Violet sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her face glowing with happiness as she worked. They talked for hours about names, about what kind of parents they wanted to be, about the future they were building. "I want our child to know they are loved," Violet said one evening as they sat on the porch. "That is the most important thing. Love and safety and the freedom to be whoever they are meant to be. They will know," Isaac promised. "Every single day they will know." As Violet's due date approached in late August, Isaac found himself growing increasingly anxious. He had Dr. Harrison come out to the ranch twice to check on her, wanting to make sure everything was still progressing normally. Both times, the doctor assured him that Violet was doing well, that there was no indication of any problems. "Stop hovering," Violet told Isaac with affectionate exasperation. "I can feel you watching me constantly. The baby and I are fine." "I just want you safe," Isaac said. "I know, and I love you for it, but Isaac, you have to trust that everything will be all right." Violet went into labor on a hot afternoon in the last week of August. Isaac immediately rode into town to fetch Dr. Harrison, pushing his horse as hard as he dared. The doctor gathered his supplies and rode back with Isaac, trying to reassure the panicking father-to-be. "First babies often take a long time," Dr. Harrison said. "Try to stay calm. Your wife needs you to be strong for her right now." The labor did indeed take a long time. Through the evening and into the night, Violet labored while Isaac held her hand and prayed harder than he had ever prayed in his life. Dr. Harrison remained calm and professional, checking on Violet regularly and assuring Isaac that everything was progressing normally. "You are doing wonderfully, Mrs. Crawford," the doctor said. "Just a bit longer now." Finally, as dawn was breaking on a new day, Violet gave one last great push, and a baby's cry filled the room. Isaac felt tears streaming down his face as Dr. Harrison held up a tiny, red-faced infant. "You have a son, Mr. Crawford. A son." Isaac moved to Violet's side, hardly able to see through his tears. She looked exhausted but radiant, her face glowing with joy and relief. "We did it," she whispered. "Isaac, we did it." Dr. Harrison cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket before placing him in Violet's arms. Isaac looked down at his son, at the tiny face and miniature fingers, and felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "Hello, little one," Violet said softly. "We have been waiting for you." "He is perfect," Isaac said, his voice choked with emotion. "You are both perfect." They named him James, after Violet's father, with the middle name Thomas after Isaac's grandfather. Little James Crawford came into the world healthy and strong, with a good set of lungs that he demonstrated frequently. Those first weeks were exhausting but wonderful. Isaac helped with everything, changing nappies and walking James when he was fussy at night. Violet recovered quickly from the birth, though Isaac still insisted she rest as much as possible. "You are going to spoil me," Violet said one evening as Isaac brought her dinner in bed so she could eat while nursing James. "You just gave me a son," Isaac said. "I will spoil you for the rest of our lives if I want to." Watching Violet with James filled Isaac with a love so profound, it sometimes overwhelmed him. The way she gazed at their son, the gentle way she cradled him, the soft songs she sang while rocking him to sleep. Isaac had thought his heart was full before, but James had opened up new chambers he had not known existed. They took James to church when he was 3 weeks old, and the whole congregation celebrated with them. Mrs. Chen brought over meals for a week, insisting that new parents needed to focus on their baby, not cooking. The Petersons gave them a beautiful christening gown that Mrs. Peterson had sewn herself. "You have been blessed," Reverend Thompson said as he held James during the christening. "This child is a gift, a sign of God's grace and new beginnings." Isaac looked at Violet, standing beside him in her Sunday dress, and then down at James in his christening gown, and he knew the Reverend was right. After years of loneliness and grief, he had been given a second chance at happiness. A wife he loved deeply, and a son he would protect with his life. A family. As James grew from an infant into a chubby, curious baby, the ranch continued to thrive. Violet had been right about the potential she saw. With both of them working hard and making smart decisions, they were able to expand the herd and even hire a young man named Tom to help with some of the heavier work. James took his first steps on a sunny October afternoon, stumbling from Violet's arms to Isaac's with a delighted laugh. Isaac caught him and swung him up high, making the baby shriek with joy. "He is going to be walking everywhere now," Violet said, laughing. "We are in trouble." "Best kind of trouble there is," Isaac said, kissing James's chubby cheek. When James was a year old, they had a small party to celebrate. A few families from church came out to the ranch, and the children played while the adults talked and ate Violet's cooking. Isaac watched it all and marveled at how much his life had changed in just 2 years. "What are you thinking about?" Violet asked, coming to stand beside him. "Just remembering the night you stumbled onto my property in the rain," Isaac said, putting his arm around her waist. "I was so lonely back then. I had convinced myself that I was fine, that I did not need anyone. And then you appeared and you brought light back into my life. You brought hope and love and laughter. You gave me a reason to look forward instead of back. You saved me too," Violet said, leaning into him. "I was lost and scared, heading toward an uncertain future with a stranger. Instead, I found you. I found home." They stood together watching their son play with the other children, and Isaac sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the storm that had brought Violet to him, for her courage in staying, for the love they had built together, for James and the family they were raising, for second chances and new beginnings and the sunshine that had been missing from his life for so long. "Do you think we should have more children?" Violet asked softly. Isaac looked down at her in surprise. "Do you want more?" "I think so. Eventually." "James should have siblings." Violet smiled. "This ranch needs to be filled with children and laughter and life." "Then that is what we will do," Isaac said, kissing her temple. "We will fill this ranch with children and love and all the happiness we can create." As the sun began to set over the Colorado plains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, the Crawford family headed back toward their house. James toddled between his parents, holding both their hands, chattering away in the nonsensical language of toddlers. Isaac looked at his home, no longer the lonely, silent place it had been when he lived there alone. Smoke curled from the chimney. Curtains Violet had made hung in the windows. Her garden, now harvested for the year, lay ready for next spring's planting. The sounds of their guests' laughter and conversation drifted on the evening breeze. This was what Sarah had wanted for him, Isaac realized. Not for him to stop living after she died, but to find happiness again. To build the family and legacy they had dreamed of together, even if it was with someone else. Sarah had loved him, and love meant wanting the other person's happiness, even after death. "Thank you," Isaac whispered, not sure if he was speaking to Sarah or to God or to the universe in general. "Thank you for bringing her to me. Thank you for this life." "What was that?" Violet asked. "Nothing," Isaac said, smiling down at her. "Just counting my blessings. 2 years later, Violet gave birth to twin girls, much to everyone's surprise, including Dr. Harrison's. They named them Rose and Lily, and James was delighted to be a big brother. The ranch house, which had once echoed with loneliness, now rang with the sounds of children laughing and playing. Isaac built an addition onto the house to accommodate their growing family. 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen where Violet could cook and bake while keeping an eye on the children. Tom had proven himself valuable enough that Isaac made him a partner in the ranch, and Tom built himself a small cabin on the far edge of the property. The years passed in a blur of hard work and deep happiness. James grew into a serious, responsible boy who loved working alongside his father with the cattle. Rose and Lily were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and getting into mischief together. When James was 8, Violet gave birth to another son, Samuel, who had his mother's green eyes and his father's stubborn determination. Isaac and Violet grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They had their struggles, of course. There were lean years when prices dropped and hard winters that took some of the herd. There were times when the children were sick and they sat up all night worrying. But through it all, they had each other, and that made everything bearable. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac took Violet back to Greeley for a special dinner at the restaurant where they had eaten on their first trip to town together. The children stayed home with Tom's wife, Mary, who had become a close friend to Violet over the years. "Can you believe it has been 10 years?" Violet asked as they ate dessert. "Sometimes it feels like just yesterday you were pulling me in from the rain. Other times, I can barely remember my life before you." "I remember every detail of that night," Isaac said. "The way the rain sounded on the porch roof, how cold your hands were, the first time you opened your eyes and looked at me." He reached across the table to take her hand. "I was already starting to love you even then. I just did not know it yet." "I fell in love with your kindness first," Violet said. "The way you took care of me without expecting anything in return. The way you talked to me like my thoughts and opinions mattered. And then I fell in love with your strength and your honesty and the way you loved so deeply, even though it scared you. You made me brave," Isaac said. "You showed me that it was possible to love again without betraying the past, that I could honor Sarah's memory and still build a new life." They finished their dinner and walked through town, hand in hand like young sweethearts. The town had grown considerably in the past decade, with more businesses and families arriving all the time. But Isaac and Violet's favorite place was still their ranch, away from the bustle and noise. When they returned home, the children were all asleep, and Mary quietly let herself out. Isaac and Violet checked on each of their babies, even though James was almost 12 now and hardly a baby anymore. Then they went to their own room and held each other close, grateful for the life they had built together. More years passed. James grew into a young man who managed much of the ranch's day-to-day operations. Rose married a schoolteacher from town and moved to Greeley. Lily married Tom and Mary's son, and they built a house on the ranch not far from Tom's cabin. Samuel decided he wanted to be a doctor and went away to study in Denver. Isaac's hair turned gray, and he moved a bit slower than he used to, but his mind was still sharp, and his love for Violet had only grown stronger. She had lines around her eyes now and silver threads in her dark hair, but to Isaac, she was as beautiful as the day he had pulled her in from the rain. They became grandparents when Rose had a daughter, and then again when Lily had twin boys. James eventually married a girl from a neighboring ranch, and they had 3 children in quick succession. Samuel came home from medical school and opened a practice in Greeley, where he met and married a nurse. On their 25th anniversary, The whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. 3 generations of Crawfords, plus Tom's family who were like family anyway. Isaac stood on his porch, now expanded and covered, and looked out at all the people talking and laughing and eating Violet's cooking. "What are you thinking about?" Violet asked, coming to stand beside him. It was a question she had asked him countless times over the years. "I am thinking about how close I came to missing all of this," Isaac said honestly. "If I had not been sitting on this porch that night 25 years ago, if I had not seen you walking up the path in the rain, my life would have been so different, so empty." "God's timing is perfect," Violet said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "We found each other exactly when we were supposed to." "You know what the best part is?" Isaac asked. "I still get excited when I hear you singing in the kitchen. I still love watching you work in your garden. After 25 years, I still look forward to sitting with you on this porch every evening and talking about our day. You still bring sunshine into my life, every single day." Violet turned to look up at him, her green eyes bright with tears. "And you are still my safe harbor. The place I want to come home to. The person I want to share everything with, good or bad. I love you just as much today as I did when I said I do, maybe even more." Isaac kissed her, a sweet kiss full of the comfortable affection of a long marriage, but also with the passion that had never faded between them. Their children and grandchildren cheered and clapped, making them both laugh and break apart. "Get a room," James called out, grinning. "It is our anniversary. We will kiss if we want to," Violet called back, making everyone laugh. The celebration continued into the evening. They had a huge dinner with all of Violet's specialties, dishes she had perfected over the years. There was music and dancing, with Isaac twirling Violet around the yard like they had decades ago. The grandchildren ran around chasing fireflies as darkness fell, their laughter floating on the warm summer air. As the night grew late and families started heading home or to the guest rooms they had prepared, Isaac and Violet sat on their porch swing, swaying gently. The stars overhead were brilliant in the clear Colorado sky, and the sounds of the ranch settling in for the night were familiar and comforting. "Do you have any regrets?" Violet asked quietly. Isaac thought about it seriously. "I regret the pain Sarah went through. I regret that she did not get to live the life she deserved. But I cannot regret the path that led me to you, because that would mean forgetting our children and grandchildren, and I would never do that. So no, I do not have regrets, just gratitude for every day I have been given with you." "That is how I feel too," Violet said. "My path was hard sometimes, losing my parents, being alone and scared. But it led me here to you, to this beautiful life, and I would not change any of it." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just being together. After 25 years, they did not always need words. Sometimes the silence said everything that needed to be said. "You remember what you said to me that first night?" Violet asked eventually. "When you thought I was still unconscious?" Isaac searched his memory. "I do not think I remember." "What did I say?" "You said you had not had company in 3 years and you would be damned if I died on your sofa the first night." Violet laughed softly. "I was barely conscious, but I heard you, and I thought, this man has a good heart. This is someone who cares, even about a stranger." "I am glad you did not die on my sofa," Isaac said with a smile. "That would have been a terrible ending to our story." "Instead, we got this ending," Violet said, gesturing to the ranch around them, to the house full of love and family. "This is so much better." As they prepared for bed that night, Isaac watched Violet brush out her long hair, a nightly ritual he had watched thousands of times. And just like always, he was struck by how lucky he was, how easily his life could have gone a different direction. how close he had come to spending his whole life alone and bitter. "I love you, Violet Crawford," he said as they settled into bed. "I love you too, Isaac Crawford," she replied, curling into his side like she had every night for 25 years. Isaac lay awake for a little while after Violet had fallen asleep, listening to her steady breathing, feeling her warmth beside him. He thought about that lonely rancher he had been, sitting on his porch and slowly dying inside even though his body kept working. He thought about the young woman who had stumbled out of the rain, lost and alone, and he thought about what they had built together. Not just the successful ranch or the beautiful family, though those were certainly blessings. But more than that, they had built a partnership based on love and trust and mutual respect. They had created a home full of warmth and laughter. They had learned together how to honor the past while embracing the future. Violet had brought sunshine back into his life, yes, but more than that, she had brought hope. She had shown him that it was possible to love again, to be happy again, to build something beautiful from the ashes of loss. And in doing so, she had saved him in every way a person could be saved. The years continued to pass peacefully. Isaac eventually handed over most of the ranch operations to James, though he still helped out when he could. He and Violet spent more time with their grandchildren, spoiling them in the way grandparents do. They took trips sometimes, visiting Samuel in Greeley or Rose in her new house on the edge of town. But their favorite place was always their porch, sitting together and watching the sun set over the land they had worked so hard to build up. That was where they felt most at peace, most connected to each other and to the life they had created. When Isaac was 67 years old, he and Violet celebrated their 30th anniversary. It was a quieter affair than their 25th, just family and close friends. But it was no less meaningful. They renewed their vows in the same church where they had married 3 decades earlier, and there was not a dry eye in the building as they promised once again to love each other, until death parted them. 30 years ago, I married the woman who saved my life, Isaac said during the small reception afterward. I was lost and alone, and she brought light back into my world. These 30 years have been the best of my life, filled with more love and happiness than I ever thought possible. Violet, you are my heart, my home, my everything. Here is to 30 more years. I will take as many years as God gives us, Violet said, her eyes shining. Every day with you is a gift. You took me in when I had nothing and nowhere to go, and you gave me everything I could ever want. A home, a family, a love that has sustained me through every joy and every challenge. I am so grateful for every moment we have shared. They danced that night like they had at their wedding, slower now but no less sweet. Their children and grandchildren watched with smiles, understanding that they were witnessing something special. A love that had endured for 3 decades, that had weathered storms and celebrated joys, that had only grown stronger with time. As Isaac and Violet grew older, they slowed down but never stopped cherishing each day together. They had breakfast together every morning, worked in the garden together in the afternoons when Isaac felt up to it, and sat on their porch every evening without fail. It was their ritual, their time to connect and talk and simply be together. Their children and grandchildren visited often, keeping the house full of life and love. Isaac would sit in his chair and hold his great-grandchildren, marveling that his family had grown so large. From that lonely rancher who thought his life was over, he had become the patriarch of a thriving family that would continue long after he was gone. One evening in early autumn, when Isaac was 72 years old, he and Violet sat on their porch as usual. The sunset was particularly beautiful, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Violet's hand was in Isaac's, their fingers intertwined in a grip that had become second nature over 35 years. "It has been a good life, has it not?" Isaac said quietly. "The best life," Violet agreed. "I could not have asked for anything more. No regrets, not a single one." Violet squeezed his hand. Only that I did not have more years with you," Isaac said. "I wish I could have 100 more." "We have had 35 beautiful years," Violet said. "That is more than many people get. We have been truly blessed." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear overhead. The sounds of the ranch were familiar and comforting. The horses moving in the barn, cattle lowing in the distance, a coyote calling somewhere far off. This land, this place, had been the backdrop for their entire life together. "Remember that first night?" Isaac asked. "When you stumbled up that path in the rain?" "How could I forget?" Violet smiled. "I thought I was going to die out there. Then this grumpy rancher appeared like an angel and carried me inside." "I was not grumpy," Isaac protested, "but he was smiling too." "You were absolutely grumpy, but you had a good heart, and I could see that even then." Violet turned to look at him, her green eyes still as beautiful as they had been when she was young. "You saved my life that night, Isaac. In every way that matters, you saved me." "We saved each other," Isaac said, echoing words Violet had spoken decades ago. "That is what love does." They sat together until the stars filled the sky, talking about their life, their family, all the memories they had created together. And when they finally went inside to bed, they held each other close, grateful for one more day together. Isaac passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years later at the age of 74. He died as he had lived the last 3 decades of his life, with Violet by his side, surrounded by love, at peace with the world. His children and grandchildren mourned him deeply, but they also celebrated the incredible life he had lived and the legacy he had left behind. Violet lived for several more years, surrounded by her family. She stayed on the ranch, which James continued to run successfully. She spent her days in her garden, with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and on the porch where she and Isaac had spent so many evenings together. She never stopped talking about Isaac, keeping his memory alive for the younger generations who had not known him as well. She told them stories about the lonely rancher who had taken in a lost woman from the rain, and how they had built a beautiful life together against all odds. When Violet finally passed away at the age of 82, she was buried beside Isaac in the cemetery in Greeley. Their children had a beautiful headstone made, with both their names and a simple inscription. Love saved them both. The ranch continued to thrive, passed down through generations of Crawfords, and every person who lived there who worked that land knew the story of Isaac and Violet. How a chance storm had brought them together, how love had transformed both their lives, how they had built something lasting and beautiful from nothing but courage and hope. And on summer evenings, when the sun set over the Colorado plains in brilliant shades of orange and gold, it was said that if you sat quietly on the old porch, you could almost feel their presence. The lonely rancher and the woman he had taken in from the rain, still together, still in love. Their story a testament to the transformative power of opening your heart to another person, even when you thought you had nothing left to give. Their legacy lived on not just in the ranch they had built or the family they had raised, but in the love they had shared. A love that had weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical, that had grown stronger with each passing year, that had created ripples of happiness spreading out through generations. Isaac had taken Violet in from the rain, and she had brought the sunshine that had been missing from his life. Together, they had created something beautiful and lasting, a love story that would be remembered and cherished for all the years to come.